All right, all you baseball fans out there, it's your man, Ernest Dove, your favorite St. Lucie Mets reporter, talking all things minor leagues and Mets minor leagues. It's one of those special occasions and days today. Your guy, the big Reverend Tom Bryce, he gave me the keys to the Lambo, aka the Sports Report, for this special segment to talk some specific in baseball with a New York Mets columnist, the Mets beat writer for the record at northjersey.com. I have for a quick talk today, talking baseball, Mr. Justin Toscano. How are you, my friend?
Ernest, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. I feel like it's good to be on. We've been talking on Twitter so much and going back and forth on, not only the team, but the minor league stuff. So it's actually good to hop on with you today.
I know this is awesome, man. You're also one of the big things and big guys too on social media. You can catch Justin on Twitter at Justin C. Toscano, Toscano. And yeah, man, this has been an interesting couple of years too, even for you since you started. If you wanted to give all the fans out there a little bit of a small background on you and how you've become now one of the columnists in one of the biggest markets in the world for sports.
Yeah, so obviously just went to journalism school for this, got an MLB.com internship covering the D-backs my senior year of college. So that was kind of what really led me to this job, even though I had a job before it. But it was it's been pretty crazy. Like I still feel like I've gotten my feet under me a lot more, obviously, since 2019. But because I got there in the middle of that season, and that was just a wild season, and then 2020 was cut short, and obviously like just not full real season, it still kind of feels like I'm really like in my first year, because this is like my first full year, so it's been a little slower on that track. But yeah, no, it's been wild, like from the things I've gotten to cover, like God, like 2 manager firings and hirings, and 2 GM firings and subsequent hirings and promotions, and then an ownership change. And it's been a wild ride. And yeah, it's but obviously like I'm really grateful. And I wouldn't, when I think like if I were 6 years old and you told me that I was doing this right now, like every day, I'd probably pinch myself.
So that's it, living the dream. I know a lot of people, they see it as one of those dream jobs, but they always say, man, the grind,
Right.
it's got to be insane. And I know even for the sports report on sportnarium.com, a lot of the fans out there are from the UK. These guys pretty much start their baseball viewing almost past midnight every day. So I also want to know, even for them, when you put in the grind as a reporter and as a columnist in Major League Baseball, what kind of late hours do you put in?
Wow, well, first of all, respect to those fans. I mean, that's real dedication. Because yeah, I know how hard it is to like work those late hours. So the grind is kind of like, for a 7:10 game, the earliest I ever remember getting out is like maybe like 10:45, 11. And that was in the clubhouse era. So like in the Zoom era, where you've got to like wait for all these guests on Zoom, and it's like this whole, robotic process. Like usually I'm not out of there until 11:30 midnight, which means I'm not home till midnight 12:30. And then you've got like the wild games, like the rat raccoon thing. That was like, God, I got home at like 1:30 or something like that. The wild game in Philly where they almost tied it, but it was a double. I got back to the hotel at like, I think it was like 2. So it's like, and I'm the type of person that I just cannot, like, I can't walk in the door, drop off my stuff and hit the hay. Like I've kind of got to like unwind a little bit and take some time to myself. So yeah, like a lot of times my sleep schedule, man, is just like ready to murder me, because I'm not getting to bed until like 3 or 3:30 some of these nights, just because things get so crazy. And it's like my body's, it works in the opposite way, because my body's not set to like sleep till noon to compensate, or like sleep till 11. So it's like, I'm up and at 'em. But yeah, like you said, it's definitely like a dream job. But but a lot of the people who think it's just like eating hot dogs and peanuts, like it definitely is a grind, like especially in Major League Baseball, like you're working every day. And it's like even the off days for the Mets this year, like things have been going on, whether it's DeGrom to the injured list on May 10th, or I'm trying to think of other things that have happened on off days. So it's like even on off days, it's like you've still got to like write a story or like work, and it's just like you're always keeping tabs of things, and you're always by your phone, and it's just like it can get toxic if you let it. And so that's like the real realism part of it. I feel like for me, I just come from a place of gratefulness. Like I'm grateful to be here every day, be there every day, and like grateful to do this and like use my gifts for good and good, that whole sort of thing. But I also know what comes with the territory, and I also know like it is a very tough job realistically. But then again, man, like at the end of the day, I think my life motto is like that and I heard this from Steve Gilbert, who mentored me when I covered Diamondbacks for MLB.com. He's their full-time guy over there. He told me that like he said this about himself. He goes, I take my job seriously, but not myself too seriously. And I think like for me, especially coming from San Diego, like that's probably my motto is I just don't take things very seriously. Like unless they need to be taken seriously, like, you have crime and all these sorts of things, that bad things that happen on a beat that definitely need to be taken seriously, whether it's that or sexual harassment. But I just, in general, like I'm covering sports, like some people go to work doing heart transplants and surgery and stuff like that, and they're saving lives, man. Like what I do isn't real pressure. And so I just like, for me, like I just try to have fun with it, even though like the hours, like you said, man, are long. So I do respect those UK people, because man, not to run on too long, but yeah, I know the feeling of not going to bed until the sun's basically almost coming up again. So
That's it. You got to do what you got to do. And also, I was wondering too, the way when you started talking about it a little, like the differences, even just with the Mets organization, obviously, biggest market in the world, but
yeah.
also just the different ownership groups. And I'm wondering, even the trickle down effects. Well, now we're in this weird, so you come on and all of a sudden we got these pandemics, everything's changing for life. But if we attempt to put that aside, I was wondering some of your thoughts on the differences pre-God Steve Cohen that everyone has been loving that since he started, and now since he took over, because it does seem like there's been some changes and differences, even trickling down to the media and the information. Because you've got an owner out there, this guy's actually out there tweeting about like Francisco Lindor before there was a signing, which was causing a stir. So I was wondering your thoughts now as a reporter, along with having to worry about everything else, you may also have to worry about the actual owner of the team giving out information and how it's being spread. So what are your thoughts on the differences between the prior ownership and the new ownership?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because I think like the prior ownership, and I think Mets fans, especially the ones on social media, are very aware of this, like leaked a lot of stuff. And I was only there for, let's call it, I guess, like only like a year and a half of that ownership. So it wasn't really like I got to experience that much of that, but it was more like leaks and things like that. It seemed like, whereas, and you would know based on who got it, like who leaked it. But now it's like, yeah, like now it's just that thing when something happens, like the Stroman injury in Philadelphia, like when he left the game early, like you're like, should I like text somebody, or like, should I just wait for Steve Cohen to inevitably tweet it out? That one I didn't expect him to tweet out, but that's like an example. It's just that like, like as we're things are flying around about the Lindor stuff, like he's tweeting about it. So you're like, it's hard, because you're like, is this guy like out of pocket just tweeting because he's the boss, or does he know something, things are headed in the right direction, if that makes sense? So you kind of have to consider that. And it seems like it's more of a tight ship run, now more of a traditional organization in terms of just like the injury updates we get and things like that. But I mean, there still seems to have been some miscommunication on a lot of those injuries and just like the information that's coming out. And I know like people blast Luis Rojas for that, but it's like he's only saying what he's getting told to say, basically, and like what he's being told. And so I guess the biggest difference is that the information's handled differently, because at any point you have an owner that could tweet something out and it could just become breaking news. So it's like you just have to keep Steve Cohen's Twitter on your phone. And it's just like, I don't know, man. Like sometimes you're just like, you just don't know. So I think that's the biggest difference, is you have this guy who's so like willing to be front and center. And I don't think there are many of those in pro sports. In fact, the only one I can think of that would even be like this in terms of social media presence is Mark Cuban for the Dallas Mavericks. And I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't really see Mark Cuban like break injury stuff, or like, hey, Stroman left, today with like a hamstring tightness or something, like, so it's like, it's really odd. And I think it's just, it's strange. But in terms of like, the information, I think like a lot of the stuff's the same in terms of like the sourcing and things like, the information we do get and how things are explained. But I think it's like, it's more of a tight ship, and that like things aren't, I think the organization has been able to break its own news in a sense, if that makes sense, a lot more, it seems like.
Yeah, I think he's also slowed down a little bit, which is also probably part of the Mets Twitter chaos that can get to people all the time. But I remember sometimes he was literally kind of calling out certain even national columnists and reporters like, that's news to me. And that would shut down some reporters for a few days. Probably also something you have to worry about too. If you try to report something, you may have the owner of the team say, I haven't heard that yet. And then you're sitting here in shock on social media. So I'm sure that probably has to give you a pause on a regular basis. But even
Yeah, yeah. Especially with like the injury stuff. It's like there's so many the way like things actually happen aren't the way they're presented to the media, if that makes sense. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, I don't know. I can't
yeah,
really expand that much, but it's just like people think like the reporters like are wrong, with the reports, but it's like no, it's like the stuff you might be hearing behind the scenes is just like different than what's presented publicly. And that's the really hard part about it, is that they're trying so hard to filter a lot of these things. And you just like, and I think it's created a lot of like mistrust with the fan base. And like, yeah, like the fans do deserve to be like upset about some of that stuff, like I would be too. Like if you're constantly told about these, rosy timelines that just turn worse, like, and like I said, it's not that serious. It's sports. Like, come on, it's a game, but like it is kind of a weird, game to play.
yeah, definitely. I'm sure it's also a weird game to cover with all these
Yeah.
things going on, and you're balancing in the social medias and the tweets because, God forbid, you just wait and you just kind of report and write a column. By then, way too much has happened. So I know there's so much that has to go into being a columnist these days on the beat in Major League Baseball. But I'm also wondering too, for you in general, you're covering the team, big market or not. When they're awful, that kind of sucks, and it's different environment, different responses in your articles, different responses on social media. What have you seen, first of all, what have you seen even kind of quote unquote in the clubhouse through Zoom or everything else prior and now with a team that's now currently in first place rather than the old third, fourth place Mets, regardless of record, everybody's upset. What have you seen covering the team as some of the differences this year with that?
Yeah. So again, I'll preface with like, of course, we don't have the most accurate view because we're not like in the clubhouse every day. And even when we were in the clubhouse every day, like those guys just have to keep whatever, shit they have going on hidden for the 50 minutes that we're in there before the game. So it's like, that always like you might not be able to like glean what's going on behind the scenes just by like being there, but it's still a little different. But I think like what we've seen on Zoom this year has resembled kind of like that 2019 run in the second half where they were like really good, and they were winning that winning streak, and it felt like they were never dead. And I think that's a lot of like what it seems to be like. Even after losses, like these guys are pretty proud that like, hey, they're putting out, they know they've got a lineup with multiple minor leaguers in there, and good for them, man. It's like these guys are showing up and they're making the most of their opportunity. And I think like, to be honest, that probably gives them a lot more confidence, and it seems like it does, because it's like they know, hey, if we're hanging around and if we're winning with this lineup, it's like, imagine what we can do with our normal lineup when everybody returns. Now that's like a big when and a big if, but yeah. So I think it's been a lot more fun because there's a lot less tension. And I think like some of those bad parts of 2019, you could just like that clubhouse, like you kind of like cut the tension with a knife, and like it's just like it was really palpable, and it like felt heavy at times. And now it's like, and we're not in there, so we'll learn more once we get field access and then like clubhouse access eventually, whenever that returns. But yeah, it's a lot more fun because the guys are pretty loose, and it kind of has that 2019 atmosphere where they're just having fun. And it's like they have all these different like shirts that they're making with the logos on them, and they have like the jokes, like whereas it'd be like Donnie Stevenson or the Rat or Raccoon thing, and it's like they're just kind of like they're having fun. And I think that's like the biggest part, is that you don't see that with every team, man. Like I think like a lot of reporters, you might ask, like they might be covering teams that are just more veteran guys that like are just kind of stick to their business and do their work every day, and that's fine too. But this team likes to have a lot of fun, and so like it makes it fun too when they're doing like weird stuff on Zoom, or like it just kind of like you kind of never know what to expect. And it's nice to be able to get a couple laughs in there. And I think in turn, with a good team, like the fan base cares more. Now that applies less to Mets fans because like they care just as much, about the stories and about tweets and everything we do, how we cover the team when the team sucks versus like when the team's good. But it's like good too, because like, hey, on Memorial Day, like people are going to be tuned into the game, so it's like, whereas like a lot of teams on these Saturdays or Sundays, like the fans like don't really watch the games if the team's mediocre or bad or whatever, but Mets fans seem to be always tuned in. And so it's like a really cool environment because of that.
Absolutely. And even again, for you covering the Mets, for the record, on NorthJersey.com, I was wondering, even in these couple of years, what are some of the ones you look back on, maybe some of your quote unquote favorite articles or stories that you've written so far, even the prior ownership, new ownership? What are some of the best stories that you really enjoyed putting out there for the readers?
Oh man, it's a good question. Dang, I feel like it's bad that I don't even have like a, not that I'm not proud of anything. I just like I feel like I write so many that like that I do, was proud of. So like definitely during in spring training, I wanted to do something on like Steve Cohen's impact. And I was really proud that I got, was able to get the information about the Mets kind of doing the cross platforming with point 72 and things like that to have like a better data engineering arm. So I was able to get stuff on Cohen, and on his impact that people like didn't have to that point. Really proud of that. I was proud of a couple of Jacob deGrom stories I did during the shutdown last year. One of them was like I was able to kind of track the stages of his career through like one of the guys who knows him from back home and has kept up with him for a long time. That was really cool because I got like anecdotes that honestly I probably wouldn't have gotten from Jacob deGrom or that because he just doesn't, no, I don't think many people would have gotten from Jacob deGrom. And then I did one on his like high school basketball days. One of them that I really enjoyed doing was I like one day I went up to JD Davis in 2019 and I was just like, I just asked him about his routine and I made that like a whole thing about like what he does daily in between, like it, and I did like, I split it up based on like time periods and things like that. And like people really like that one. And I enjoyed doing it because I got to like, I was actually curious about it because I got to learn like what it really is like, for the day, what a big leaguer's day is really like. So I like that one. And then I've got a soft spot for like the underdog for sure. Like I don't think I've ever been the guy who's like been super highly regarded everywhere. Like I don't really think I've been, the top prospect, quote unquote. So I do like, I feel like I kind of like champion the underdog or like I'm kind of like the voice of the voiceless in that sense. And so like one of them that I really enjoyed was doing a story on Paul Sewald because I found out by talking to him that he had almost quit baseball and like he was pitching for the Mets, obviously in 2019. He'd almost quit baseball and like he was working 3 jobs in the off season just to stay afloat and make some money because the minor leagues weren't doing it for him as they don't do it for, all these guys. And so I think that was cool because I got to tell the story of like some guy who almost really quit, but stuck to his dream. And like, yeah, people joke around saying he, is a career, like a quad A guy or whatever. But it's like at the end of the day, I mean, I think stories like those are my favorite. And that's why the job hasn't been as fun during the pandemic era because it's like I'm not really getting to tell as many of those cool stories that I really enjoy doing. Because I do think like good stories like that can inspire people who read them, can let fans get to know who they're rooting for. And yeah, man. So I think those are some of them that I was particularly proud of.
That's awesome. Hey, you know what? Shout out Paul Sewald. He's back in the majors again for, I believe, the Mariners organization. So
Yeah, the Seattle Mets.
yeah, the Seattle Mets. They just want to pick up everyone that the Mets drop. They get picked up by the Mariners one way or another. Apparently, that's the new shtick over here they got going on. But I know too, like what you said, it kind of hit me. That from knowing me on social media and reporting on the minors. That's kind of like my heart and soul right there. So it got me thinking. So since I've been covering and doing the media for the St. Lucie Mets down there, one of the best things that it's been happening to me for years, more than just covering the game and trying to give out stats, and there's a lot of minor league junkies out there, but one of the best things that I've experienced like in my whole life as far as doing this has been the interactions with the players and probably even more specifically the family members of the players in the minors. So I was wondering, some of your thoughts on that, because again, you've got a bigger presence, you're the New York Mets columnist and beat reporting and social media. I was wondering if you've had any interactions in the last couple of years or just kind of a lot of any thoughtful contacts or anything from maybe even the players or again, even the family members of the players, just kind of almost even maybe even saying, hey, thanks, Justin, that was pretty cool, or kind of liking your social medias. Because when you talk about their guy, like that's their guy. Have you ever had certain experiences like that in the last couple of years?
Yeah, for sure. And I do like, I think that's why you and I get along maybe better than most, just because I think like you're like this way too. I've always thought there are a lot more Luis Guillormes in Major League Baseball than there are Mike Trouts, obviously. And it's like, I get that the job's always going to be riding the stars, but whatever. So anyways, yeah, 2019 to do a story on JD Davis and his brother, who was, a college football player, FBS, I talked to his dad. So I've gotten to know that their family pretty well through that. I talked to Sewald's mom for that story. Like Brett Beatty's dad has been very very nice to me. And that one was more so because I knew, like, from having been in the industry, that like high school kid, he was a high school age kid when he was drafted. And high school kids, they just don't, like, they're often like, they don't give like great quotes, even if they're used to the media coverage, just because they're not as used to it as like a college guy or, whatever. And so to do a story on him initially, I got his dad's number and talked to his dad, and his dad, they've been great. And yeah, you see, like, whether it be Joey Lucchese's mom on Twitter or Jordan Yamamoto's wife on Twitter. And I think, like, for me, like I've definitely had family members who have like unfollowed me. But it's like, like, because at the end of the day, I'm still gonna have to do my job, and I'm still gonna have to tell it like it is and tell the truth. But like, I do think on the most part, like, not that I try to be positive about the team, because if things aren't going well, I'm just gonna be straight up with it. And I had, in 2019, 2020, I did write a lot of those where I just like slammed the team basically because it deserved it. But like, in terms of just like being nice to players and things like that, I'm very positive like that, because that's what I do believe. Like, I do believe, you should treat people well and treat everybody like you'd want to be treated. And I think sometimes like players and their players' families appreciate that approach, where like you're not just like, like, I think the best way I can put it, and I'm trying not to ramble on you, is that like a lot of these jokes are like funny, right? Or we think they're funny when you're like, oh, some guy named, like Garrett Richards just like, shut out the Mets through 6. Well, like that's some guy, or like some guy named Joe Smith or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? Like, you might see jokes from like other reporters on Twitter like that, but it's like, that snarky joke is like really hurtful to somebody's family. And like, because they know all the hours that person put in, and they know how hard it was. And that person who's like the last man in a Major League Baseball organization, like, he was the best in his town and the best on his high school team by far. And he was better than, at what he does than anything most of us will ever do. And so I think it's like, for me, I like jokes. And like I said, I don't take things super seriously, but like, I've tried to keep into perspective, like not to be snarky if I can help it, just because like I think like the players' families like appreciate when you, obviously they're not going to be happy sometimes when you tell like it is, but they appreciate when you're not like taking pot shots. And so I think like that has also helped me.
Yeah, always. I mean, it's never about keeping things personal, but even in social media, it don't even matter what you say. I remember I got my own story a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. I even interviewed a player, had a good relationship with him. And then maybe a year or two later, I'm just basically putting out stats, how things are going. My whole timeline is filled with everybody trashing him. He's awful. Just throw him out of the league, release him in the minors. And all of a sudden, one day I'm looking up, put in his name real quick, and I saw I was blocked by him. I'm like, what did I do?
Oh
So,
my God.
so I'm like, yeah, those kind of things can be weird too. Even if you don't say anything, it's just kind of the chain of events that start happening. So that's why it's kind of funny. But that's why, again, yeah, that's my heart, because these guys are all also professional athletes. And then when it comes to the minor leaguers, you always want to talk about, the quote unquote struggles, but also more of the positives. You don't really get too into the other stuff. But even for you, even before we close it out, I wanted to know some of your final thoughts right now on, again, let's just say, knock on some wood, that the rest of the roster doesn't actually go on the IL and they could actually remain in first place all year. I'm wondering, what do you think it's going to be like for you as a reporter for the New York Mets to be reporting on a first place team throughout the entire season in Major League Baseball? Because they're going to want the New York markets to be winning anyway. So what do you think that's going to be like for you for the rest of the season?
Yeah, crazy. Just like, being in this industry, I've never really taken for granted like the privilege of chronicling like the long-term story of a team and of an organization. And I think to have that story take its next twist this year with like this team going from, Wilpon ownership to like, hey, they're in first place and they had all these depleted pieces and, this depleted roster, and they're still in first place. Like, honestly, I think it's going to be really exciting, just because I still, was grateful to go to work every day, like when the team wasn't good last year and when the team, struggled in 2019, because like, it's still fun. Like, we still get to cover sports. But I think when you can cover a good team, and like, I've never been on like a playoff run on this beat, and like, I know like the others who've been on for a while haven't since 2016. So it's like, for the first couple of years of my job, I've covered Yankee playoff games with our Yankees guy, but like never Mets. And so like, to be, at a postseason series would be crazy. And even just because like, yeah, it's really cool, like just to be in position to cover a good team, because like a lot of, if you're like, well, now the Royals reporter, like the Rangers reporters or something, sometimes, or the Mariners reporter, reporter is like, you don't know when that next opportunity is going to come. And for a lot of organizations, like, I mean, I grew up in San Diego, so I know this really well. For a lot of organizations, you never know when that next postseason appearance is going to come. So when you're sitting in first place, you're covering a team in first place, even at the end of May, like, you're grateful because you know that, like you said, if it continues like this and you get to cover the postseason, I mean, that's something like that I've always wanted to do in my career. And I think, like, for me, like, that would be the coolest thing. And it's just like, I just remembered when the Astros came to the Bronx and just like covering those games, and it was just electric. Like, my favorite part of sports is the emotion, man. And like, just everything that goes on, with the emotion and, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, all that stuff. And like, the emotion is the best part to me. Like, I don't even care about the results as much, or sometimes like the mechanics of it. Just the emotion is what makes sports great in my eyes. And it's the best part. And I think, like, there's no better encapsulation of that than the postseason. I think to be able to like be on a run like that and to cover it up close and to be there for the ride is something that, like, I would never forget and would never take for granted along the way.
Of course. And you're going to be there all year long.
Heck
covering
yeah.
the Mets, for the record, at
Heck yeah.
northjersey.com for at Justin C. Toscano, Toscano. You'll be able to follow him also on Twitter. Follow him at northjersey.com for the record. And then again, you'll also have little old me at Ernest Dove, ErnestDove. I'm the minor league. See, Justin Toscano he's the major leagues. I'm the minor leagues guy. I'm not at his level, so I'm still fighting it. You can still catch me with the St. Lucie Mets, reporting on the low minors and the minor leagues of the Mets organization. So now you got your guys, right? You got your people to listen to, and you got your people to read about and hear about, talking about the Mets and the minor leagues all season long. And you still got me every week through the weekends on the Sports Report on sportnarium.com. And any final thoughts from you, Justin, before I let you go?
Oh, no, I guess, I just want to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day weekend. I hope everybody has a good weekend. I know, like, past year's been tough, but let's keep hanging. Let's keep swinging. And let's get into a nice summer 2021.
I love it. And hey, of course, we'll keep it simple and just say, let's go Mets. How about that?
There we go. All right.
All right. Thank you, man.
Yep. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.